I'm still trying to arrange that the security guys will not come with us to the island. Does this work for you? That was text from a leaked email sent by former Israeli Prime Minister and intelligence master Ehud Barak to his very good friend Jeffrey Epstein just a few years ago, discussing how he was trying to arrange a visit to Epstein Island without any additional security or prying eyes. Why didn't he want to bring his security to the island? Why did he want to visit alone? Well, this is just the first of many disturbing emails recently leaked to the press, and they only get worse from there. You see, just a few weeks ago, over 100,000 emails from former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak were leaked to the public. And inside of some of those emails is some incredibly damning, disturbing information. This is a rapidly developing story and a dangerous story too, so viewer and listener discretion is heavily advised. Now, according to what I could find, these emails were first put up online last year by a hacker group known as Handala, a hacking group that is believed to have existing ties to Iranian intelligence. The group's official website, with an address of handala-hack.to, has been online for a while, and on that website appeared a webpage dedicated exclusively to the hacked emails of Ehud Barak. The wording on the website, which is still up right now, states 110,000 secret emails of the former prime minister. This is Ehud Barak, your former prime minister. We have been present in your prime minister's office for decades. We have sat in your most secret meetings, listened, and made a conscious decision. A warning for Bibi. Last night you heard the voice of resistance. You have seen the military and intelligence power of the resistance. If you make a stupid decision, your destruction is very easy. The answer will be devastating resistance. As we were in Ehud's office for many years, we are also present now, but we react to the time. Password, Handala. And at the bottom of the page, they provided not only some casual looking pictures of former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, but also a photograph of his passport, which I'm assuming they published online to prove that the emails were legit. Now, if you go to the actual homepage of this group's website, the Handala hacking group, you can find some pretty eerie sounding messages and posts, like posts that say that, quote, soon your suspended doom will rise from the depths of darkness, end quote. They also claim that, quote, we are the shadow you thought was a mirage, end quote. And they also state that, quote, behind your iron walls, your false sense of peace will crumble, end quote. So I think it's safe to say that these guys and this group is deadly serious about their work. Now, I myself, through a proxy, not off of that website, but through a different website, downloaded all of Ehud Barak's emails. I don't suggest that you do online. And I downloaded them through the nonprofit leak archiver DDO Secrets, where you can find a lot of interesting leaked information. Let me just say that. To my knowledge, it's unknown exactly how many references there are to Jeffrey Epstein in the over 110,000 leaked emails, as I don't believe that journalists have finished looking through all these messages yet, but the emails that have been identified so far are pretty damning and disturbing to say the least. And let me tell you this, it's honestly really bizarre that we've seen almost an entire media blackout on this story. I don't know why I haven't seen any mainstream media outlets covering this story. I mean, it's absolutely insane. You have these leaked, hacked emails from a very powerful figure on planet Earth, a very famous, very powerful figure. And these emails intertwine Jeffrey Epstein with a lot of the famous faces that we know are associated with Epstein and paint an even darker picture of the associations between these people. And yet, I only found one article on Yahoo News that was kind of like mainstream discussing this stuff, and the other places that have been reporting on all of this have been more independent journalism websites and newsletters and stuff. It's really bizarre. You'd think that they would actually want to report on this because the emails have been verified essentially. Like, they haven't been, denied. Even Ehud Barak, his team hasn't denied that the emails are legit. They've just basically said no comment to all of it. So it's really weird. I wonder why no one's talking about this. But this isn't the first time that the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, has been brought up in relation to Epstein. In fact, in the past, he has been intimately linked to Epstein, not just through business and social connections, but also through disturbing allegations of But quickly first, before we get into these leaked emails, we need to talk about Ehud Barak. Now, curiously, along with the recently leaked emails, a number of new documents have been released by the House Oversight Committee that is, right now, according to them, investigating the Epstein scandal. Now, I already talked about one of their big releases recently, the Epstein birthday book, in a video last week, but if you take a look at this document that I'm putting on screen right now, you'll see a few names that you might recognize, along with one that you will definitely recognize. The page on screen was allegedly written by Jeffrey Epstein's butler long before Epstein died, in the midst of his days, during a time when his peddling of children to the powerful was at an all-time high. This document was recently released by the House Oversight Committee, so you know that it's legit. And as you can see on the page, there are a number of important email addresses listed. You can see some of the addresses for yourself. You've got Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's partner in crime, some other unrelated names, a man named Christophe, who was a French driver, and then you see Ehud Barak, who was listed as the former PM of Israel on this page. Also, though, the person who wrote this down on the page also wrote down that there were Secret Service personnel escorting Ehud Barak while he rode on Jeffrey Epstein's planes. Now, obviously, this raises a lot of questions. If Epstein had no formal ties to the US government, other than being friends with the former president and a few other assorted officials, why were there Secret Service members personally escorting the former, keyword former here, Prime Minister of Israel while he was on Epstein's plane? Obviously, this makes no sense at all whatsoever. And disturbingly, right under this discussion of Ehud, there is a handwritten note about Jean-Luc Brunel, another who I've talked about, who, just like Epstein, was found dead in his prison cell with some cloth tied around his neck, if you know what I'm saying. And next to Brunel's name is a note that says he's a scout for young females. Also listed on this page amongst the supervillains of the Epstein saga is magician David Copperfield. I still can't find any more information about this page, what it means, or how this all really ties together, but we're going to keep all this in the back of your mind. We're going to come back to it later. It's important. Because you see, in the intricate web of global power brokers, where secrets are currency and alliances can be as dangerous as they are lucrative, the leaked emails from former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak's inbox offer a chilling glimpse into a relationship that defies explanation. This story resonates with the hallmarks of a thriller, a spy thriller really, but unfortunately it is rooted in dark reality. Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted whose elaborate underage operation ensnared presidents, princes, and intellectuals before his death, emerges in these emails as some sort of a master connector, weaving the threads of finance, technology, and influence. Ehud Barak, a towering figure in Israeli history, appears not only as a passive friend of Epstein's, who was familiar but not close with the man, but as an active participant in multiple aspects of Epstein's life, exchanging both casual messages about things like private island visits, all the way to formal business proposals like investing in a surveillance startup, all at the same time receiving direct notifications from others about Epstein's rapidly unfolding, which Ehud Barak has denied knowing about previous to Epstein's death. The cache of emails itself is comprised of over 110,000 different messages sent from 2007 to 2016. Now, Ehud Barak's biography itself reads like a saga of valor and strategic brilliance, forged in the fires of Israel's perpetual struggle for survival, which makes his entanglement with Jeffrey Epstein sort of an anomaly amongst a resume of alleged heroism. Born Ehud Barak in 1942 on a humble kibbutz during the turbulent era of the British Mandate, Ehud adopted the surname Barak, symbolizing the word lightning in Hebrew, upon enlisting in the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, in 1959. Spanning over 35 years, Ehud's military service elevated him to a legendary status in the country of Israel, and earned him the title of Israel's most decorated soldier. During his time in the IDF, Ehud's highest held position was Chief of the General Staff, an incredibly powerful, high-up role. It should be noted here, too, that Ehud spent many years enlisted in Sayeret Matkal, I hope I said that right, the IDF's premier special forces unit, which, according to Wikipedia, is, quote, primarily a field intelligence gathering unit, conducting deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines to obtain strategic intelligence. Sayeret Matkal is also tasked with a wide variety of special operations, including black operations, combat search and rescue, counterterrorism, hostage rescue, Humint, irregular warfare, long-range penetration, conducting manhunts, and reconnaissance beyond Israel's borders. The unit is modeled after the British Army's Special Air Service, or SAS, taking the unit's motto, "Who dares wins," end quote. And Ehud's time spent in this highly secretive intelligence gathering unit seemed to have molded him into an expert in covert arts and deep state intelligence operations. In fact, Ehud commanded the daring 1972 Operation Isotope, where he and his team stormed the hijacked Sabina Flight 571 at Lod Airport, neutralizing terrorists and rescuing hostages in a hail of bullets. In 1973, he donned a woman's disguise, complete with a wig, makeup, and a dress, to lead a raid in Beirut, a raid that ended up assassinating PLO, or Palestinian Liberation Organization leaders, in an operation that showcased Ehud's proficiency in infiltration and psychological deception. As a central architect of the 1976 Entebbe rescue, Ehud orchestrated the liberation of over 100 hostages from Uganda, coordinating long-distance flights, mock presidential motorcades, and allegedly even lightning strikes that saved lives while striking fear into Israel's adversaries. I'm telling you all this because, think about it, these exploits provided Ehud with a very, very intimate, hands-on mastery of intelligence gathering, risk assessment, and strategic planning in life or death situations. Skills that, in effect, should have equipped him to be able to detect the perils, the danger of associating with a man like Jeffrey Epstein, a man whose 2008 conviction for procuring a child for was at that point very, very public knowledge, yet whose relationship with Ehud Barak intensified afterwards. Now, Ehud Barak's progression through the IDF ranks placed him at the nucleus of Israel's intelligence machinery, where he wielded authority over decisions that could alter the nation's destiny, underscoring the irony of his ties to Epstein. From 83 to 85, he was the director of Amman, the military intelligence directorate in Israel. And in this role, Barak was entrusted with furnishing the prime minister and cabinet with strategic intelligence alerts, compiling exhaustive national estimates, and supervising intricate cross-border intelligence collection efforts, a role that demands that the person holding the position have an acute and active vigilance against potential compromise and foreign influence. This position, one of the most pivotal in Israel's security architecture, refined Ehud's ability to identify subtle threats, including, according to them, methods of entrapment and leverage. However, those were precisely the tactics that Epstein was accused of employing in his own network, which is bizarre. And that's where you start to wonder, was Epstein trying to get something on him, or was this guy helping to mold Epstein into someone that could get something for him because he was so well versed in all of this stuff, in intelligence gathering and being vigilant against compromise or compromat material, and knowing the dangers of what could happen if someone were to become compromised, like knowing the value of having that sort of a, let's call it a blackmail against somebody. This is somebody who would know exactly what was needed in an intelligence operation to really not only get the intelligence, but also to entrap individuals so that they're perpetually under your thumb. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, after serving time in the Amman, Ehud Barak commanded the Central Command and served as Deputy Chief of Staff, managing operational domains amidst violent geopolitical turbulence. Elevated to Chief of the General Staff in 1991, Ehud then guided the IDF during the covert Oslo peace negotiations, at the same time being privy to classified details while counseling on security implications and executing redeployments in the West Bank and Gaza. Although he wasn't a frontline negotiator, Ehud's involvement in this entire affair afforded him a rare perspective on the symbiosis of intelligence and diplomacy, and positioned him in an incredibly powerful position in Israel, and made him essentially a guardian of Israel's deepest, darkest secrets. This profound expertise in deception and counterintelligence makes Ehud Barak's decision not only to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein, but to deepen his friendship after Epstein's conviction almost unbelievable and unthinkable. I mean, here's a man who, according to his service record, worked nearly his entire life in intelligence, in secret intelligence, pretty much, the Israeli CIA, gathering information on people, spying on people, running black operations, working completely under the radar, probably getting blackmail on other people, or at least learning the ins and outs of blackmail, serving in these high-profile, extremely powerful positions in the Israeli government, knowing the ins and outs of what it takes to get that power that everybody, when you get to that level, desires, and not only how to get that power, but how to use that power to manipulate people and change the world into ways that you want it to change, if that really makes sense. So that's what he was doing his entire life. And yet, once again, Ehud Barak chose willingly to associate with Epstein, a man who operated behind the scenes one of the world's largest and most elite. In fact, Ehud and Jeffrey were very close friends, as has been reported previously in various news outlets. In fact, it's known that Ehud visited Jeffrey's estates 30 times or more between 2013 and 2017, and that they met together almost every month in person for nearly a year from December 2015 to December 2016. It's also known that Ehud Barak was documented to have flown on Epstein's private plane twice, including on a 2014 Palm Beach to Tampa flight with his wife and some guards, as a calculated risk, potentially prioritizing the perceived benefits of being friends with Epstein over the potential dangers. Now, Ehud Barak's shift in Israel from a high-profile military servant into the disgusting world of politics demonstrated how versatile he was as a political figure, and his country watched as Ehud turned from a warrior into a statesman with a global reach. Yet, his Epstein connection casts a massive, looming shadow over his legacy. After a short U.S. interlude, Ehud joined Yitzhak Rabin's 1995 administration as Minister of the Interior in Israel, and eventually ascended to Foreign Minister under Shimon Peres following Rabin's assassination, navigating international waters amidst national mourning. Elected the Labor Party head in 1997, Ehud Barak's decisive 1999 victory over Benjamin Netanyahu installed him as Israel's 10th Prime Minister, where he pursued transformative policies. For example, ordering a withdrawal in 2000 from southern Lebanon to conclude an 18-year occupation that had cost lives and resources, and also by driving intensive negotiations with Syria and the Palestinians. The pinnacle, though, was the Camp David 2000 summit with Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton, an ambitious bid for a final status agreement that, despite failing and igniting the Second Intifada, elevated Ehud Barak's international profile and granted him access to the world's power elite. He was a household name at that point, chumming it up with Bill Clinton at Camp David, and after 2001, he engaged in business and consulting before returning to politics in Israel as defense minister from 2007 to 2013, under Ehud Olmert and Netanyahu, overseeing intelligence operations with the same tactical acuity that defined his commando era. This trajectory, from elite infiltrator to intelligence czar to head of the country and back to intelligence czar, encapsulates Ehud Barak's story perfectly, and shows that this is all important, is a man who has a very clear understanding of risk, of subterfuge, of influence tactics, of political strategizing, and intelligence operations. And this, to the viewers who are really following this, what I'm saying, makes a naive view of the relationship between Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein absolutely unrealistic and completely silly. When you consider all the facts and history here, it all suggests that Ehud's friendship and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein really seems to have been a deliberate sort of strategy. Perhaps Ehud exploited Epstein's own web of connections for geopolitical or financial advantage. Or maybe Ehud himself was simply a client of Epstein's, victimizing the children that he... This has actually been discussed many times publicly by at least one Epstein victim that we're going to talk about later. Or, as many have suggested and many believe online, Ehud Barak could have been one of Epstein's many handlers, his employers, if you want to call it that. Because if you don't know, I don't know how you don't, but Jeffrey Epstein was the figurehead of a blackmail gathering operation. Essentially, Epstein was friends with all of the elite. Elite politicians, elite artists, elite people in Hollywood circles, elite world leaders. And Epstein would provide these people with these certain proclivities, the things that they wanted or the things that they needed. And he would film them doing this. That's why every Epstein mansion or house, whatever you look at, there are always cameras in the bedrooms and the bathrooms. I mean, I talked about it recently. The front hallway in his damn New York mansion was covered in eyeballs. I mean, it's just so blatantly obvious that this guy was gathering video, photo, blackmail evidence against the people that he was providing these children to. Because then, this is a side note and a tangent, but once you have that photo or that video, let's say it's Bill Clinton, allegedly, just making up a scenario. Let's say you take Bill Clinton and you say, hey, so we have this videotape of you having with a... Now, either you can pass this law or veto this law, or we're going to release this to the public. Of course, Bill Clinton in this completely hypothetical situation is going to dance for the people who have the compromise material on him. And that's essentially what Epstein was. Now, Epstein was definitely working within the United States government itself to gather compromise material on some of its own people, but he was also working with foreign governments, which is why we're here today talking about this and these disturbing, intimate connections between the former Prime Minister of Israel and Jeffrey Epstein, the world's premier. And there is a lot of evidence out there that suggests that this is more than likely one of the many realities surrounding Epstein, that he was indeed working for this foreign nation at the same time as he worked for the United States. Now, according to contemporary reporting and released documents, it is known that Ehud Barak, according to the stories, first met Jeffrey Epstein in the year 2003 through Shimon Peres at an event with American dignitaries. That's a quote. Now, you could say, I believe this, I don't believe this. Personally, I don't believe this. And I think, obviously, Epstein was in the midst of this operation a long time before this. So the people who had set him up to use him had already set him up years, decade or so, prior to that. But that's kind of the official reported on story, is that meeting in 2003. And according to this reporting, that meeting between the two rapidly developed into a friendship and a working relationship that would go on to unfold over a period of more than 15 years into a disturbing tapestry of frequent engagements, private travels, and joint business ventures. And Epstein's 2008 guilty plea and his 13-month sentence for soliciting a minor for had no impact on this friendship. In fact, in a particularly bizarre move, Epstein himself was actually allowed by the authorities here in America, you don't see a lot of people talking about this one, to head back to Israel for a short time after he pled guilty to soliciting a minor for before he was sent to prison. So he was essentially, they knew that he was going to go to prison, but before he turned himself in to go to prison, they allowed him to visit a foreign country. In fact, here's an actual news report from that time. This is a vintage archived news report, 2008, where the anchors from the local news station in Florida that are covering this story actually make some on-air remarks about just how bizarre this entire arrangement and this last-minute trip to Israel really was.
The last time we saw Jeffrey Epstein in West Palm Beach was September 6th of last year. He was getting off his private jet at PBIA to huddle with lawyers, fighting charges he used his mansion in Palm Beach for escapades with girls under. Reliable sources tell us he'll report for a 1.5-year term in prison in Florida in June, then face a year probation. The fact that Epstein was allowed to travel to Israel reflects his vast business interests around the world, according to someone close to the case. But allowing someone soon to be imprisoned on felony charges to leave the country is highly irregular. That, according to investigative journalist John Connolly, who has covered the Epstein scandal from day one.
In most instances where people are facing criminal time and because a plea agreement has been made or they're under arrest for serious charges, they are forced to surrender their passport. And apparently Mr. Epstein has not been forced to do that.
The fact that the court ordered Epstein not to have contact with underage girls may indicate that Epstein will be labeled. That is something his vast stable of high-powered attorneys have been fighting. Sources tell us that Epstein will likely report to a state prison with modern internet facilities so that he can do business from behind bars. It's been more than 3 years now since Palm Beach police started investigating Jeffrey Epstein. Reporter Connolly says money has bought him time.
I've always been a bit shocked by the way the state prosecutor has handled this case from the get-go. Historically, the police have asked for arrest warrants and been given them. In this case, because of apparently some very high-powered attorneys, they've treated Mr. Epstein much differently.
Now, even after Epstein served his time and, got out after the sweetheart deal, Ehud Barak went on to visit Epstein's New York and Florida mansions approximately 30 or so times from 2013 to 2017, including, like I mentioned before, for those monthly sessions in person that occurred for nearly a year starting in December 2015. These interactions often served as high-level forums, like one trip where Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein met with Noam Chomsky and debated, quote, Israel's policies with regard to Palestinian issues and the international arena, end quote. There's also another documented trip involving both Epstein and Barak, where they met with a consulting firm executive from a firm linked to former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Now, if you know Henry Kissinger, you know that he's one of the most evil to ever live, and a video on him is definitely coming soon. Now, Ehud Barak has publicly maintained, when asked about his connection to Epstein, that he never saw any wrongdoing, he never saw any children on board Epstein's planes, and that he obviously himself never anyone. And he himself has portrayed Epstein as being a, quote, terrible version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, end quote, who, quote, seemed an intelligent, well-connected man with many interests from science to geopolitics, end quote. Ehud Barak has claimed in the media that he, quote, never participated in any party or any other inappropriate event with him, end quote, and, quote, never met him with girls or minors, not even with adult women in the context of any inappropriate behavior, end quote. He also said, quote, I came to his house quite a few times with my wife, and claimed that he remembered meeting interesting people at Epstein's place. However, the images captured in the year 2016 of Ehud Barak entering Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion with his face obscured by a neck gaiter proved to be pretty controversial. You see, those images were first published widely in the publication The Daily Mail, and initially they were met with public vows from Ehud Barak himself, saying that he is going to combat blood libel and lies. Those are exact words from him, and he then threatened to hit the Daily Mail with massive libel suits. Yeah, at first, he actually threatened the Daily Mail, stating that their reporting was completely false and essentially that wasn't him in the pictures. However, he eventually changed his tune and conceded and admitted that yes, it was actually him in the photos, and he stated that, quote, I was there for lunch or chat, nothing else. So what? End quote. However, even though Barak provided journalists with a supposedly innocuous reason for being at Epstein's mansion, these pictures served as visual evidence that Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein maintained a close relationship, even years after he was convicted for soliciting a minor for. Then there's the 2016 birthday letter from Ehud Barak and his wife Nili Priel, which were sent in for Epstein's 63rd birthday. A letter in which Ehud Barak described Epstein as, quote, a closed book to many of them, but you know everything about everyone, end quote. Can someone say intelligence connection? In the same letter, Ehud Barak also referred to Epstein as chillingly, quote, a collector of people, end quote. Also, inside of Epstein's home, as revealed in some recently published photographs of Epstein's New York mansion, sat a hand-drawn map of Israel, drawn eerily enough on a chalkboard, allegedly by Ehud Barak himself. Now, regardless if Ehud actually drew the map or not, his signature definitely does sit at the bottom of the map, signed with the same chalk that the map was drawn with. And obviously, this map implies a deep connection between Epstein, Ehud, and Israel. Now, financial dimensions also anchored the relationship between Epstein and Barak, starting with $2.3 million that was sent to Ehud from the years 2004 to 2006 from the Wexner Foundation, where Epstein was a trustee. Now, what was this money sent to Barak from this foundation for? Well, it was for a few commissioned papers, one being a 267-page Israeli-Palestinian analysis, which was finished by Barak, and the other thing that they were paying him for was an ultimately unfinished leadership study, whatever that means. For that second work, the abstract and the research for the study were submitted by Barak and his team to the Wexner Foundation, but he never submitted the final work, and after all was said and done, full payment was deemed justified, despite the leadership study technically being returned to the Wexner Foundation unfinished. But regardless, for that work, writing and researching, Barak was awarded $2.3 million from the Wexner Foundation. Now, if you know the story of Jeffrey Epstein, you know that Wexner, Les Wexner, and his cadre of evil individuals were crucial and critical and key to the molding of Jeffrey Epstein. We'll just say that. So a $2.3 million donation from the Wexner Foundation, which has the deepest possible ties to Jeffrey Epstein, already is just a bad start. And later on, when all of this was eventually found out and reported on, that this former prime minister was paid millions of dollars for unfinished work for an almost 300-page research paper, the Wexner Foundation has since attempted to clarify that Epstein's role was only administrative and that he had no input or sway in the company when it came to who the Wexner Foundation was going to award grants or donations to. Now, I find that to be complete. Epstein is working, he's not only extremely close, really good friends with Les Wexner, but he's, involved with, in an official capacity, the Wexner Foundation, and they're trying to claim that Epstein played no part in Ehud Barak getting those millions of dollars from the foundation. Epstein's, new friend with a budding friendship. There's no way that he received that payment from the Wexner Foundation because of Epstein, who worked there and was really close to Wexner himself. There's no way, man. It's just ridiculous. It's ludicrous. Now, years later, the Wexner Foundation itself actually on paper dismissed Epstein in the year 2007. They on paper let him go amidst their concerns of alleged But that link, the Epstein-Wexner-Barak link, fueled attacks against Barak in Israel, being used by people like Benjamin Netanyahu in his own campaign videos, in one of which he actually verbally asked the viewers, what else has Epstein given to Barak? But the financial entanglements don't end there. Now, more explicitly, in 2015, now you really need to follow me here because this is a little bit twisted, but it's going to make sense and it's going to be a really dark revelation when you understand what we're getting at here. In 2015, Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, created and incorporated a limited partnership that he called Sum EB 2015, which was a company funded mainly at first by an at least $1 million investment by none other than Jeffrey Epstein himself. This limited partnership company, formed by Barak and financially backed by Epstein, was formed in order to back a company known at the time as Reporty, which currently today is known as Carbyne, an Israeli startup that still to this day, at least on paper, delivers 911 technology that comes with a side of surveillance. You see, Carbyne provides real-time video streaming, geolocation, and data from smartphones and devices, sometimes to help save lives, other times to help catch criminals, other times, I'm assuming and alleging, to spy on people. Now, Carbyne's leadership, the company itself, which formally up until 2020 included Ehud Barak and a man named Pinchas Bukris, a former Unit 8200 commander, which is Israel's cyber espionage powerhouse, sort of similar to the NSA or National Security Administration. This leadership of this bizarre random 911 call company has freaked some people out with concerns of potential espionage and how this technology could be used to spy on not only American citizens, but really citizens of any country. Now, Pinchas Bukris actually was one of the founders of the company, which is an important detail because he was also, kind of like Barak, an integral figure to Israeli intelligence and the Israeli intelligence apparatus for years. Now, Carbyne, as a company, this is the company that Epstein provided the money to Barak's partnership so that they could fund. According to them, they developed cloud-based next-generation 911 solutions that aim, at least on the surface, to modernize emergency communications. Carbyne's main platform enables the real-time transmission of rich data from callers to public safety answering points known as PSAPs. For example, when a 911 call is made, Carbyne's system can immediately provide the 911 dispatcher with the caller's precise GPS location, a live video feed from the caller's smartphone camera, live audio streaming, text messaging, and other telemetry in parallel with the voice call. The company offers both an app-based service and an app-free option. And with the Carbyne mobile app, previously called See Now, users can pre-install this app on iOS or Android to automatically send video and location data during an emergency call. Now, obviously, having a foreign company headquartered in New York City that can quickly gain access to a caller's live audio and video feeds, which are then sent to a cloud server, is pretty disturbing and alarming, especially when you know that a lot of the board members or founders of the company have deep ties to various intelligence agencies. And even to this very day, if you go online and verify this yourself, you can, the advisory board of Carbyne holds some familiar names. For one, there's Secretary Michael Chertoff, a very scary looking dude, the former Secretary of Homeland Security to the US government. And there's also Secretary Christian Nielsen, another former Secretary of Homeland Security to the US government. They're on the board of that company. And these are questions you need to ask yourself. Why are there heads of agencies and government bodies that gather intelligence from multiple countries on the board of a company that helps facilitate 911 calls? It makes absolutely no sense. Well, it does actually make sense if you know exactly how to look at it, but we'll save that exact kind of complexity for another video. Interestingly, this company and its ties to Israeli intelligence almost mirrors, in a way, the Ghislaine Maxwell family legacy. Now, as we all know, Ghislaine Maxwell was Epstein's key accomplice, and she was the daughter of Robert Maxwell, an alleged MI6 KGB Mossad agent, a certified media titan who owned the publication The Daily Mirror, along with textbook publisher Macmillan, who rubbed elbows with everyone from Queen Elizabeth II to Margaret Thatcher and even US presidents like Donald Trump. Over the years, there have been a lot of claims of espionage leveled against Robert Maxwell, including claims that he helped arm Israel in 1948 and afterwards through illegal arms deals and allegations that he tipped off the Mossad about upcoming whistleblower revelations from an Israeli nuclear technician, and even claims that he helped sell backdoored promise software to governments and governmental agencies that allowed the Israeli intelligence services to secretly access and harvest highly sensitive data from various US agencies. Now, we're going to talk about Robert Maxwell at length in an upcoming video, but that's just a very small sample of the entire body of disturbing allegations made against him throughout his long and mysterious life. And interestingly, in 1991, after Maxwell mysteriously died at sea, he himself was given a full Israeli state funeral, attended by then Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, Israeli President Chaim Herzog, at least 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence, and many dignitaries and politicians, both government and opposition. And he was ultimately buried on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. A pretty large funeral when you consider it. I mean, it's like the President of America coming to your funeral for a man, Robert Maxwell, with supposedly no legitimate, long-standing connections to the Israeli government or intelligence apparatus. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell herself is Robert Maxwell's Oxford-educated golden child, who, as we all know, eventually partnered with Epstein in New York, and the rest is history. Now, at least one known victim in a case against Epstein claimed in a legal filing that she was told that Robert Maxwell was in the Mossad and was, quote, led to believe by both Maxwell and Epstein that Epstein was as well, end quote. So the connections between that government and Epstein are there. Now, interestingly though, here's where we see a bit of a pattern. Now, the operational model allegedly employed by Robert Maxwell in that Promise software affair presents a very striking historical parallel to Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein's 2015 investment in Carbyne, that 911 company. Now, both instances, both stories, the Carbyne tech and the Promise software, feature a powerful non-state actor like Ehud Barak at the time, or Jeffrey Epstein and Robert Maxwell, with deep ties to the Maxwell family network, facilitating the proliferation of technology with significant surveillance capabilities developed in close proximity to the Israeli intelligence sector. I mean, it's strikingly similar. Remember, the Promise scandal was essentially Robert Maxwell helping to facilitate the sale of a computer program called Promise, Promis, which included a virtual backdoor of sorts that Israeli intelligence agents could use to gain access to the data on whatever computer or device the Promise software was installed on. And this software was sold to US government agencies with highly sensitive data. This was sold to other foreign governments as well, without, these governments being told that there's a way that this other government could use this software to spy on them. And this was sold to them purposefully so that they could be infiltrated and raided for data and intelligence. Now, it's bizarre that years later, another Maxwell-linked individual, this time Epstein, would invest in another software that was being sold to US government agencies, this time mainly police departments and departments in America. You can see on their website there are many townships and police departments that use this Carbyne software that was developed with full support of Israeli intelligence. Now, this pattern suggests that the Carbyne investment may not have been an isolated financial venture, but potentially a modern iteration of a proven intelligence gathering and influence model, with Ghislaine Maxwell's network serving as the critical bridge between her father's era and Epstein's. However, Epstein's final arrest in 2019 thrust the friendship between himself and Barak into Israeli politics, with Benjamin Netanyahu publicly demanding investigations into Ehud Barak and Epstein's friendship, and once again producing and disseminating videos that said things like, "What else has Epstein given to Barak?" highlighting once again that strange payment from the Wexner Foundation and questioning quid pro quo, tweeting out images of Ehud Barak with, quote, "convicted Jeffrey Epstein," end quote. Ehud Barak's responses over time, though, morphed. Initially, like I said before, Barak stated that these were all lies, that he wasn't really friends with Epstein, that they weren't close, that this was something that Benjamin Netanyahu was just making up, with Barak saying that Netanyahu targets, quote, "whoever gets in the way of Netanyahu and his extremists becomes a target of lies, incitement, gets called a traitor, and worse," end quote. And like I said before, Ehud Barak even threatened the Daily Mail and told them to, quote, "prepare their credit cards," end quote. But later, he admitted to visiting Epstein and said, quote, "I never attended a party with him. I never met Epstein in the company of women or young girls," end quote. However, after Epstein died, Ehud Barak seemingly once again changed his tune a little bit more. After Epstein's death, he publicly stated, quote, "On this day, I am thinking of his victims, the price they paid, and the terrible things he did. Like many respectable people in the US, in retrospect, I would have preferred never to have made contact with him." I wish I'd never met him, end quote. He then called the allegations against Epstein and his cadre of famous familiar faces abhorrent, and interestingly, also advised his lawyers to dissolve the ties between himself and the Carbyne company, saying publicly afterwards, quote, that contact was immediately severed, end quote. The scandal, central to the September 2019 elections in Israel, exposed Ehud Barak's vulnerabilities and brought his personal and business relationship with Epstein into the searing public eye. Now, there are still a lot of unanswered questions though. For example, why did Barak continue being friends with Epstein for over 10 plus years after he was convicted of soliciting a minor for... In fact, it seems as though the two of them got even closer after all of that happened. Also, Ehud Barak's claim that he was deceived by Epstein, that Epstein was a terrible version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, an intelligent, well-connected man, clashes with Ehud Barak's threat assessment prowess. I mean, this is a guy who commanded Israel and the Israel intelligence apparatus, who fought his way to the tippy top of the Israeli war machine and army, who commanded the intelligence apparatus of the country and knew the process of spying and blackmail and intelligence gathering from the inside out. And yet, for some reason, a guy like him failed to see any of the signs that Epstein was an international of minors with significant ties not only to US intelligence agencies, but also potentially to Israeli agencies too. The active bond between Barak and Epstein, which included those dozens of meetings, international travel, business partnerships, implies to someone who thinks about this for just a single second that Ehud Barak knew the risks of the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but went along with the relationship anyways for the benefits. Perhaps he knew about Epstein's Know Everything About Everyone network and he wanted access to it. All of that is information that was known before these emails came out. And with the release of these emails, there have been some striking, shocking, dark developments. Now, remember, even though victims have alleged that Ehud Barak them, and even though there has for years been an extensive relationship and friendship documented between Barak and Epstein, he has maintained still to this very day that there was nothing deeper between the two really than what has been publicly known or talked about. But let's dive into those emails. As a reminder, this trove of emails, which was hacked by the group Handala, a hacker group with suspected ties to Iranian intelligence, consists of more than 110,000 messages sent from or received by Ehud Barak's various email accounts, spanning from 2007 to 2016. Now, while not all of the emails involve Jeffrey Epstein, the messages that do unveil an absolutely striking level of intimacy between Barak and Epstein, and contain messages about everything from detailed plans for visits to Epstein's private island to collaborative pitches involving surveillance technology. So, on October 13th, 2015, Leslie Groff, who served as Epstein's executive assistant for 20 years, sent a message to Nili Priel, Ehud Barak's wife, informing her of a booklet that she was working on, a booklet intended to be a gift for Epstein's 63rd birthday on January 20th of that year, which was being organized 3 months in advance. In the email, Leslie Groff, Epstein's executive assistant, explained that she and Karina, an apparent reference to Karina Shuliak, who was Epstein's girlfriend at the time, quote, are asking a few of Jeffrey's personal friends to contribute to this special birthday gift, end quote. Now, Groff specifically wrote, we are hoping Ehud could write a short one-page story on sharing a meal in Jeffrey's dining room with Jeffrey and his friends. And she added, we are hoping Ehud may have some fabulous, weird, or enlightening story he could share. Leslie Groff, Epstein's assistant, further noted that all of the interesting stories from Epstein's interesting friends would be compiled into the booklet and presented to him on his birthday. In her response to the initial email, Nili Priel, Barak's wife, called the gift a very good idea and made an apparent tongue-in-cheek remark about the book's potential to become a bestseller. Strangely, Nili Priel then closed her email, her response, by asking for a bulky armchair to be removed from the bedroom of a New York apartment that Epstein had provided to her and Barak. The emails indicate that such a birthday book had been gifted to Epstein repeatedly over the years. For instance, the House Oversight Committee released recently a 2003 version of Epstein's birthday book after obtaining it from Epstein's estate, which contains a letter allegedly from Trump that we've talked about on this channel. We talked about all these letters and things that were sent in recently in a different video about Epstein's birthday book that's on this channel. But it's interesting here to see that this birthday book / gift thing seems to have been a tradition for Epstein's associates or girlfriends to do for him for his birthday. I personally can't imagine what other dark secrets his birthday gifts and presents from other years might hold within them, if they're ever found, documented thoroughly, and released to the public. I mean, now we've got some stuff from Epstein's 2016 birthday book and his 2003 book. What about the 04, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, all those years between and even before? What about those birthday books? What's in them? Next up in the hacked, leaked emails is an email sent by Lord Peter Mandelson, the recently fired UK ambassador to the United States, which he sent in 2013 to Jeffrey Epstein from his work email address, while acting in his capacity as chairman of Global Counsel, the multi-million-dollar lobbying firm that Lord Peter Mandelson himself co-founded. It's worth noting here that this email was sent by Lord Peter Mandelson more than 5 years after Epstein had pleaded guilty to solicitation of with a minor. And if you've seen my recent video about Epstein's 2003 birthday book, you know that Lord Peter Mandelson wrote in for that book and wrote in some disturbing things. So Lord Peter Mandelson was intimately connected to Epstein, and this email seemingly just demonstrates that fact. In the email sent to Epstein, Lord Peter Mandelson referred to a little-known Israeli political consultant called Asaf Elson and wrote, quote, "Can you ask Ehud whether he thinks of this Israeli guy living in London?" Adding, "He says he worked on political campaigns for Ehud. Thanks, Peter." It is not clear whether Mandelson got a response from Epstein, but interestingly, the leaked records show that Epstein himself then forwarded the message to Ehud Barak's personal email address. Now, I should state here that after these emails were brought to light, and some, if only a few journalists and publications looked at the email dump itself, it was announced by the Sunday Times that dozens of details had been independently verified by their publication, meaning that essentially this massive news organization in England, I think really the only one that I've seen covering this subject in depth, are indeed legitimate. When approached, the British government, the Foreign Office, declined to comment when approached by a publication about these emails, but interestingly, they didn't attempt to dispute the email's authenticity in their response. And recently, Lord Peter Mandelson actually was taken down, he stepped down from his role as the UK ambassador to the US just recently, within the last week, because of those revelations from the Epstein birthday book, and I'm assuming possibly this email as well. So yeah, there's a lot to that relationship too that I'm sure exists below the surface that we still don't know about. But we got to move on. The historian Andrew Loney, whose recent biography of Prince Andrew exposed new details about the British establishment's links to Epstein, told a news outlet recently, "I've always felt that Peter Mandelson has questions to answer about his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, and indeed his relationship with Prince Andrew. I can understand concerns about his appointment as British ambassador." And he also added, "For legal reasons, I was not able to put everything I know in my book entitled, but I welcome these further investigations into him." But Lord Peter Mandelson isn't the only member of the British establishment to have a connection, obviously, to Epstein. As we all know by now, Prince Andrew was allegedly deeply tied into Epstein's and was accused of misconduct and by a number of victims, including by Virginia Giuffre, who recently died this year, allegedly due to a self-unaliving. I believe that Prince Andrew is guilty as sin. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But he still adamantly says and states that he's fully innocent. And he's actually insisted that that infamous photograph of himself with victim Virginia Giuffre and Ghislaine Maxwell was digitally altered or photoshopped, essentially baselessly claiming with zero evidence that it's a fake picture. Come on, guys. Prince Andrew is incredibly guilty. And he comes up in the emails between Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein here too. Now, interestingly, in late 2015, Epstein and Barak exchanged some emails which seemed to confirm Epstein's friendship with Prince Andrew. The email chain started simply when Epstein emailed Barak, with whom at the time he had just invested millions into a security startup, Carbyne, which at the time was called Reporty Homeland Security. That's the 911 company that we've already talked about at length. This security company was reportedly based, once again, in Israel, though Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein remained interested in business opportunities elsewhere, including in China. In the email sent to Barak, Epstein wrote, "Wealthy Chinese looking forward to start Personal Protection Co. in Beijing," and added that kidnapping has begun. And I need to add here, I have no idea what kidnapping Epstein was seemingly referring to in this message. Barak then replied to Epstein's email about the business opportunity in China, asking how he gathered this info, saying, "Where did you see it?" Epstein, in a following email, then responded with Andrew, which prompted Barak to say, "The prince? And finally, Epstein sent a one-word email, yes. The correspondence took place shortly after Prince Andrew himself publicly played a leading role in welcoming President Xi of China to the UK during a state visit. In his official capacities, before he was booted from his position, Prince Andrew was a long-standing advocate of greater trade between the West and China, having visited Beijing the previous year at the time of this email chain in 2014. Later, Prince Andrew even exported his investment venture, Pitch at Palace, to the People's Republic of China, with the assistance of a man named Yang Tengbo, who later on ended up being accused by British intelligence services of being a spy for China, though Yang has denied that this is the case. Now, there's no evidence that the proposed Chinese security venture that Epstein and Barak talked about in this email chain actually materialized, but it is known that Ehud Barak did indeed travel to the People's Republic of China in a private capacity in 2014 and 15. Interestingly, while he was there in China, we can see from these leaked emails that Barak repeatedly emailed Epstein about personal and business matters while he was there. During his first visit to China, Epstein sent an email to Barak asking, "How do you like Chinese food?" And Barak replied, "I don't like it, so I hope I'm losing weight." Afterwards, Barak sent another message to Epstein, seemingly referencing an upcoming visit to see him in New York, typing out the words, "Look forward to meet you." However, we need to return back at this point to the subject of Prince Andrew. Remember, they're talking about Andrew and Andrew telling them about these things, and it's just like, it's showing the connection between Prince Andrew and Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein, which Andrew has denied, because you see the suggestion that Prince Andrew stayed in touch with Jeffrey Epstein as late as he did within the emails indicate is damning, as it contradicts Prince Andrew's own public statements about when he severed the relationship and poses more questions about his judgment, given that once again in June of 2008, Epstein was found guilty of procuring a child for. Yet, in the year 2010, Prince Andrew stayed at Epstein's property in New York, and in 2011, a curious scandal unfolded in England. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York and Prince Andrew's wife, at the time was facing severe financial difficulties, having reported debts of up to £2 to £5 million from failed business ventures and personal issues. And for some reason, Sarah Ferguson accepted £15,000, approximately $24,000 at the time, from Jeffrey Epstein in late 2010 or early 2011 to help pay off her debts. The payment that Epstein made to Sarah Ferguson was allegedly to settle a debt owed to her former aide, John O'Sullivan, who had loaned her money for a property deal. Prince Andrew reportedly facilitated the arrangement between his wife and Epstein, according to multiple sources, though he's always vehemently denied having had any direct involvement in Epstein's finances. Now, Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, after this was discovered and reported upon, this £15,000 she received from Epstein, she admitted to having received that money to settle her debts, and weeks later even released a statement to the press saying, quote, "I deeply regret that Jeffrey Epstein became involved in any way with me. I abhor with all children and abhor. I'm just so contrite I cannot say. When I thought that I was in the transaction, I was so distressed by the association that I feel it is appropriate that I should personally repay the money, and this will be repaid. I want no one to have a cloud over their head because of me. I accept and appreciate the regrets expressed on my behalf by Buckingham Palace," end quote. However, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't too fond of being called a in the press, and he instructed his lawyers to demand a retraction from Sarah Ferguson. According to Epstein's former associate, Doug Henderson, quote, "Epstein threatened Ferguson with a defamation lawsuit if a statement was not issued retracting the word," end quote. According to Henderson, Epstein also made a deeply unpleasant phone call to him about the matter. And to the public at the time, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson wanted to make it seem like Epstein was recently introduced to the Duchess and the Prince, and that they weren't very close friends. However, according to biographer Andrew Loney, who recently published that book about the royals entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, that just wasn't the case. According to Loney in his book, quote, "The truth is, he, Andrew, and his ex-wife Sarah had known the financier for almost a decade by 1999. Sarah had 18 numbers in the Black Book, Andrew only had 16, end quote. He also alleges that Sarah Ferguson stayed at Epstein's brother Mark's properties until 2015. Then there was the unsealed testimony from Alessi, Epstein's Palm Beach house manager, who, in a 2016 deposition that was released in January 2024, stated, quote, "Prince Andrew did receive massages. I think Sarah was there only once and for a short time," end quote. Alessi described both Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson as Epstein's friends who visited the Florida mansion together. So the relationship seems to have been much deeper, much darker than has been admitted to on the surface. But we're going to talk about that more in another related upcoming video. At the time that the payment from Epstein to Sarah Ferguson was exposed, back in the early 2010s, amid scrutiny of his relationship with Epstein, Prince Andrew stepped down from his position as a UK trade envoy, later saying that he regretted the US visit where he had rubbed elbows with Epstein and acknowledged that he had let the side down. However, Andrew never responded to a BBC report this year saying that he remained in touch with Epstein after December 2010, which was based on emails disclosed by the Financial Conduct Authority, or FCS, as part of a court case. These other emails, unrelated to the Ehud Barak drop, that were released this year, sent to Epstein by a member of the British royal family, which most people understand to be Prince Andrew, are pretty damning. For example, one released email dated February 2011 from allegedly Prince Andrew to Epstein reads, "Keep in close touch and we'll play some more soon," with like 4 or 5 exclamation points. Play some more soon? We'll play some more soon. Keep in close touch. We'll play more soon with exclamation marks. I mean, it's just bizarre. The FCA, in their release of information, also added that in the same email chain, the pair, Epstein and Prince Andrew, had a discussion of press articles. You see, in December of 2014, Prince Andrew was first accused of misconduct by Virginia Giuffre, a former masseuse to Epstein who filed an anonymous motion in a Florida court, and weeks later, she waived her anonymity in order to accuse both men, Epstein and Prince Andrew, of. And in November of 2019, Prince Andrew gave an interview to BBC Newsnight in an attempt to address his association with the who, months earlier, had died. And during this discussion, he gave his only public position to date on the duration of his friendship with Epstein. Asked by the reporter about whether the 2010 visit to Epstein's property in New York was, quote, "the only time you saw him after he was convicted," end quote, Andrew responded, quote, "Yes," end quote. And the reporter continued, asking, "Did you see him or speak to him again?" To which Andrew responded, "No." However, these leaked emails from both the FCS and Ehud Barak's inbox seemed to show a different side of the story, where Andrew indeed did continue communicating with Epstein after that scandal for years and years and years. That 2019 BBC interview caused global controversy, and instead of drawing a line under years of scrutiny, Prince Andrew was forced to step back from public life and suspend all duties as a working royal. Later on, and unbeknownst to many, Prince Andrew actually ended up reaching an out-of-court settlement with his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, which is estimated to have been worth up to £12 million, in which he did not admit liability for any wrongdoing. Essentially, he paid the victim off, yet he admitted doing nothing wrong. That sort of thing, though, has never made sense to me. Why would you pay a victim, an accuser, if you did nothing wrong? Why not fight the case publicly to clear your name? If you really are innocent, why not release a massive public statement, fight the case, provide evidence, and say, you're innocent? To me, he looks even more guilty now. Now, after Jeffrey Epstein's very public 2019 arrest, Ehud Barak claimed in the press and to the media that he had never known of his longtime good friend's inappropriate conduct with minors. Basically, he publicly stated that he was unaware that Epstein had ever been convicted on those charges in 2008 and was a registered. However, the leaked emails from his inbox reveal that indeed, Ehud Barak was repeatedly informed of the allegations against Epstein years earlier, and he seemed to know all about them. The emails in question also included discussions about visits to Epstein's private island, Little St. James, where in one email, Barak referred to the island as impressive. A leaked email from March of 2016 shows that Epstein forwarded to Barak a correspondence between attorneys Alan Dershowitz and Roy Black, as well as a New York Post columnist. In the email chain forwarded from Epstein to Ehud Barak in 2016, the columnist, Richard Johnson, informed lawyers Alan Dershowitz and Roy Black that he intended to publish a story that would accuse Epstein of not letting his conviction for soliciting a teenage girl interfere with his debauchery, and continued writing, "A recent visitor tells me Epstein has a house full of young women in his East 71st Street mansion." The alleged visitor, cited by reporter Johnson, reportedly said that while all the women appeared to be at least 17, the age of consent in New York State, they were all several decades younger than 63-year-old Epstein. Columnist Richard Johnson also suggested that a man pictured outside of Epstein's mansion in January 2016 could be Peter Listerman, a Russian who, according to the Daily Beast, was known for supplying Russian Russian and Ukrainian girls to billionaires like Epstein. Alan Dershowitz then forwarded that email to Jeffrey Epstein, saying he had refused to talk to Johnson, and Epstein then forwarded the email to Ehud Barak, asking, guess who was in the fur hat? The data cache does not show a reply from Barak, and it remains unclear whether the man in the fur hat was Listerman and why Epstein mentioned the hat to Barak. But this is just one instance in which Barak was informed of Epstein's previous criminal past and his potentially ongoing active past and did nothing or said nothing. In a separate email dating back to March 2011, Dana Zeidman, a woman who in the past worked as an assistant for Ehud Barak, forwarded an email to him that included links to 2 articles from the Daily Mail. Both of the forwarded articles detailed allegations made by Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre, who, according to court filings, also accused Ehud Barak himself of. One of the 2 articles, titled "Teenage Girl Recruited by Jeffrey Epstein Reveals How She Twice Met Bill Clinton," even mentions Ehud Barak by name as being an acquaintance of Epstein, who the victim has named as being a potential perpetrator. 4 years after that email was sent to Barak by his assistant, containing 2 articles detailing Epstein's disturbing crimes and even Ehud Barak's friendship with him, Barak accepted that reported $1 million investment from Epstein that he then used to back that 911 technology startup. The surveillance pivot revealed in the emails shows that after his first arrest for crimes, Jeffrey Epstein tried to get into a new line of work involving surveillance, as in 2015, he partnered with Barak to invest in that security tech startup that we've talked about already at length, called Reporty Homeland Security, now known as Carbyne. The leaked emails showed that Epstein was using Barak to seek out opportunities in the surveillance industry and was also using him to build connections with powerful figures around the globe, including American businessman Peter Thiel, former director of Israeli signals intelligence, and 2 people in Russian President Vladimir Putin's circle. Now, after he was first caught teenage girls, Epstein had pleaded guilty to soliciting that in 2008, and afterwards he invested his wealth in bizarre projects, including a ranch to breed women with his own DNA and, quote, efforts to identify a mysterious particle that might trigger the feeling that someone is watching you, end quote, according to the New York Times. The leaked emails show that Epstein was also interested in more mundane means of spying on and manipulating people, which overlapped with the technologies governments often pursue, and this interest crossed borders. The leaked emails paint a picture of Epstein as a man very eager to be at the nexus between private money and public surveillance, and show that while Epstein and Barak were hammering out the Reporty or Carbyne investment, Epstein invited Barak to come to a meeting with none other than Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal and the servants contractor Palantir. Now, this to me was a major, incredibly disturbing revelation. I've already made an entire video on this channel about Peter Thiel, his talks about the Antichrist, his incredibly evil company Palantir, and his plans to enact mass surveillance in the United States, a goal which is being readily helped along by Donald Trump. Also, Peter Thiel himself was essentially the guy that bankrolled J.D. Vance's political career. Many have said that without Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance would not be the guy who he is today in the position that he's in today. Essentially, Vance almost owes Peter Thiel everything. He owes him his life, his career, and so much more. So to see that Peter Thiel himself, the god of surveillance and espionage, was friends with Jeffrey Epstein way back in 2014, this is an absolutely shocking and disturbing revelation. And this just provides another connection between Epstein and the current administration. There's obviously the connection between Epstein and Trump, but now there's Epstein and Thiel and Vance. 1 degree of separation. In the leaked emails, Epstein invites Ehud Barak to join he and Peter Thiel for a meeting in May of 2014. Writing on April 28th of that year, I have Peter Thiel on the 19th in New York, if you like, as well as the former president of the Maldives. Barak then responded to that email saying, Jeff, thanks. Peter Thiel could be very interesting, but I'm flying to Europe, redacted. Next time. Although Barak couldn't make the meeting, Epstein insisted that Barak, quote, spend real time with Peter Thiel, and offered to set up a dinner the following month. Epstein even wrote another email to Barak afterwards saying, Peter Thiel can come to dinner on the 9th, can you stay until then? Afterwards, Barak wrote to a different business associate a few days later without mentioning Epstein's role and stated that he and Thiel would have an official first date soon. He said about Thiel, quote, going to meet him for dinner tomorrow. He asked to bring another person with him. I don't know why. I met him once in Davos some 2 years ago. Probably he doesn't even recall it. Let's see. I was told by the host of the dinner that we will probably spend talking just geopolitics. It's a first date. I think he's of huge potential to accelerate things by the sheer reputation he got. No way it's a waste of time. Thus, going to do it, and we will see. I'll let you know. Now, you can see here an interesting connection there as well, the town of Davos, Switzerland. That's a small Swiss town where the World Economic Forum, or WEF, meeting is held every year. A meeting where global leaders, billionaires, politicians, and CEOs gather to discuss economics, climate, technology, and geopolitics. This is one of the world's premier conspiracy-related events, as people have accused those who attend that meeting as being the people who really control the world, of being the real evildoers, the globalists. Now, it isn't exactly clear what happened during that meeting between Peter Thiel and Ehud Barak, but in February 2016, Epstein pitched Reporty, aka Carbyne, the 911 Israeli intelligence-backed company, to a company over email called Velar Ventures, a fund that was co-founded by none other than Peter Thiel himself and two of his close partners. And at this point, we see that Jeffrey Epstein writes to one of the members of Peter Thiel's group saying, Ehud Barak, former defense minister of Israel, has an interesting project called Reporty. You might want to take a look. Ehud is copied on this email. After receiving that invite to discuss Reporty, aka Carbyne, Velar Ventures general partner Andrew McCormack then wrote back saying, quote, "We'd love to hear more about Reporty. Are you in New York City in the near term, or would a phone call make more sense? Thanks for thinking of us, Jeffrey," end quote. However, after eventually meeting with the Reporty team, further leaked emails show that McCormack and Peter Thiel rejected the proposal, saying it was premature, adding that, quote, "We remain fans of what you are building and hope to re-engage in the future when the story comes into clearer focus," end quote. However, it is known that later in 2018, just a few years later, the Founders Fund, another firm co-founded by Peter Thiel, ended up joining a $15 million Series B funding round for the same company, which by then had been renamed Carbyne. So Peter Thiel ended up joining in on the same company as Jeffrey Epstein, Ehud Barak, various Israeli intelligence members, and figures, from the United States government. And to me, that sounds like a completely innocent, completely normal company, and I just don't think we should ever question it because it just is so normal. It should be noted, too, that Peter Thiel himself acknowledged to the Wall Street Journal in 2023 that he had indeed met with Epstein more than once in 2014 for unnamed networking opportunities, though the report did not mention or even allude to Ehud Barak's involvement in all of this. And Peter Thiel told the paper at the time, "I didn't think enough about what Epstein's agenda might have been." Now, it's so funny to me that Epstein seemed to hang around some of the seemingly smartest, some of the most intelligent individuals on Earth. Scientists, global leaders, masters of intelligence, some of the most incredibly mentally gifted people on the planet, but according to all of them, every single one of them, none of them had a single clue or even an inkling that Epstein was not only actively minors, but also that he had previously been convicted of against a child. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Also, these emails show that while Epstein was trying to deal with the American tech sector, he was also portraying himself to Russian elites as being sort of an apolitical wheeler-dealer. In April 2015, according to the emails, Jeffrey Epstein introduced Ehud Barak to former Russian Deputy Minister of Economic Development Sergei Belyakov, who then invited Ehud Barak to attend the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And that wasn't the only business Epstein had in mind, as he wrote to Barak in an email saying, quote, "I spoke to Sergei afterwards. He will help. I suggest you send him a note that states that you think Putin and his advisors would benefit from spending some time with Jeffrey to discuss markets, currency, and the financial system in the new world of zero interest rates, and that I am not political. He has to answer certain questions. Speak today," end quote. According to the Russian opposition news outlet Dossier Center, Jeffrey Epstein at the time offered Sergei Belyakov advice about how to work around then United States economic sanctions against Russia. Senator Ron Wyden even went as far as to allege in July of this year that the U.S. Treasury Department actually had files on Epstein's transactions with now sanctioned Russian banks, which in total added up to hundreds of millions of dollars. So the Epstein-Russia connection is not only established, but at the same time, it's also inherently mysterious and murky. Ehud Barak, in his leaked emails, also kept Epstein abreast of his contacts with another Russian businessman, a man named Viktor Veckelsberg, a Putin ally. You see, in the emails, while scheduling the eventual Peter Thiel meeting, Ehud Barak asked Epstein if there was time that day to have coffee with a man referred to as VV and Victor. And in April 2015, Barak asked Epstein what he thought of Fifth Dimension, an intelligence company publicly backed by Viktor Veckelsberg, with the pitch slideshow that Barak sent to Epstein promising the, quote, transformation of massive scale data from multiple feeds into actionable intelligence utilizing artificial intelligence in an automated real-time manner, end quote. This forwarded pitch from Barak to Epstein also included mock-ups of surveillance screens and maps that track down individual people. It's a pretty disturbing visual. Epstein wrote back that Barak should call him on the phone, although it's not clear what came of the call or what the two could have talked about. Over email, the two of them didn't discuss the project further, and the Fifth Dimension, the company, was ultimately shut down in 2018 after Veckelsberg came under U.S. economic sanctions for alleged election meddling. Through the emails, we can tell that throughout their relationship, Epstein constantly signaled to Ehud Barak that he was interested in keeping informed about and was also interested in investing in and helping to develop surveillance, intelligence, and security-related technology. Some leaked emails show Epstein forwarding Ehud Barak articles about cyber warfare, emergency preparedness, Russian nanotechnology, and even Unit 8200, the Israeli equivalent of the National Security Agency. Also, at one point in April of 2015, Jeffrey poured his heart out to Barak about some somewhat confusing, yet deeply dark and disturbing things. On April 28, 2015, Epstein wrote an email to Barak saying, quote, "What are you doing nowadays? 1. I'm trying to decide on the best way to serve. I've been asked to share my experiences with some very large corporations that translate into running major organizations with many moving pieces, critical mission statements, a formalized hierarchy. At the moment, large corporations are focused on not only on the security of profits, but on the security of their cyber systems, personnel, and protecting themselves from attack. A corporation is not dissimilar from the defense forces, many moving pieces, divisions, org chart, and the intelligence network that military has used in the past to separate data from actionable info," end quote. Barak then responded to Epstein saying, "Hi Jeff, thanks for these guidelines. Try to call later so we can discuss it further," end quote. And afterwards, Epstein wrote back saying, quote, "I've been surprised how many corporations are looking for a new military-like perspective on management. I think that as in the past corporations were focused on stockholders only and maximizing profits, they are now focused on stakeholders, the community, the employees, the suppliers. Frankly, that is much more a military point of view, and the military needs to be more usually corporate focused on cost benefits. Security is now a concern, cybersecurity of course, security of their brand, their personal, and their information. I've been fortunate to be shown opportunities to run major COs and of course sit on their boards. I enjoy strategy and strategic planning, and at the same time am amazed by the rate of which technology has moved into the private sector. We of course have had a technological focus in Israel for many years, mostly computation. Now biology and its genetic advances are changing the landscape faster than most can imagine. I feel privileged to be able to contribute some old methods to new industry," end quote. Interestingly enough, this email was sent at around the same time that Epstein and Barak invested together in Reporty, otherwise known as Carbyne, that startup focused on overhauling 911 emergency dispatch technology. This move could have brought Epstein into the world he was just talking about, the world he apparently desired to be inside of, and one of Reporty/Carbyne's co-founders and directors at the time was a man named Pinchas Bukris, a former director of Unit 8200, that Israeli equivalent to the NSA. Pinchas Bukris, in fact, told Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, in 2019, after it was revealed that Epstein had initially been a part of that company, that the investment itself from Barak and Epstein was structured in order to conceal Epstein's role. He said, quote, "Barak brought the money, and as far as I'm concerned, it's his. I don't know Epstein, and I haven't met him." So he publicly was saying that he had no idea that Epstein had contributed to Carbyne, that 911 organization. He had no idea that he had done that. However, the leaked emails, show that Ehud Barak scheduled a virtual meeting with Jeffrey Epstein and Pinchas Bukris together in December 2014, and told his lawyer afterwards to alter the terms of the investment based on Bukris' input, writing, "Dear Redacted, please note the change redacted. This change was discussed by me with Jeff following a telco we both had with Pinchas Bukris," end quote. So clearly, you can see here once again a government official lying about the depth of their association with Epstein. This time it was Pinchas Bukris, a highly powerful intelligence figure in Israel, who claimed that he had no knowledge of Epstein's investment and Carbyne and had never met him. Although the leaked emails show that not only did he know of the investment, but also that he had had at least one documented call with both Barak and Epstein in 2014. Also in April 2016, Ehud Barak asked Jeffrey Epstein to invest in Leviticon, Leviticon, an electromagnetic imaging startup, writing, "Hi Jeff, Dr. Levitt presented the science to me in much more details. Couldn't see a product, they don't have it yet, but they're leading experts on advanced radars, made sci-fi-like achievements in military products. If you agree, I will send Redacted to negotiate better financial terms with them, based on the same construct we used in Reporty. You or Redacted and me will be updated along the way. Then, based on what he can get, we will make the final decision. Do you agree? Looking forward," end quote. Afterwards, responding to that question, Epstein responded to Barak, stating yes. Barak also added in later on that Leviticon staff were all veterans of the Israeli weapons company Rafael Advanced Defense Systems. In fact, Leviticon, the same company, received part of a $1.5 million contract with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in 2020 for developing, quote, electromagnetic imaging and artificial intelligence to detect threats and concealed items in wide open areas, end quote. But the company went out of business in 2022. Interestingly enough, though, a man named Gideon Levita, a former Iron Dome missile defense engineer, is now running a startup similar to the one that Epstein almost invested in. This time called Scannery, whose promise is to perform mass airport security style scans of crowds using miniaturized radar systems. Essentially, a company whose main goal is to enact mass surveillance on, well, the masses, in ways that we've never really truly seen before. In the leaked emails, Ehud Barak offered to use the same construct we used in Reporty with Leviticon, and Epstein agreed to have Barak's lawyer negotiate terms. But Levita, the scientist and founder of the failed startup, told a news outlet recently via a colleague that Ehud Barak has never been an investor in Leviticon, and added Jeffrey Epstein was never mentioned in any context related to the company. But the most disturbing emails that were revealed in this leak, in my opinion, involve Barak and Epstein chatting about Epstein's Island, a private haven where the world's elite allegedly gathered to hold with child victims. In January 2014, Ehud Barak mentioned in an email to Epstein his efforts to keep his security detail from accompanying him to Little St. James, Epstein's private island in the Caribbean, writing, quote, "Jeff, hi, I've ended up misleading you mistakenly. Nilly sent it, right? We are reaching JFK, New York on Wed the 22nd on 6 a.m. and taking 2 hours later, 8 a.m. in AA Flight 936 to St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. The flight lands in St. Thomas on 12:55 p.m. I'm still trying to arrange that the security guys will not come with us to the island. Does this works for you?" End quote. Epstein later responded by noting that a helicopter would pick up Barak once his flight from New York landed on St. Thomas, though, chillingly, there's no further clarification within the emails as to whether or not security officers or other guests visited Epstein's island with Ehud Barak. In another email from December of that very same year, Ehud Barak himself appears to compliment Epstein Island, beginning an email to Epstein with, "Hi Jeff," and writing, "Thanks for the hospitality. Great, impressive island." He then ends the email by saying, "See you tomorrow," insinuating that the two were to meet or at minimum have some sort of virtual conference the next day. There was also a leaked email from 2016 that detailed Epstein inviting Ehud Barak to a dinner with numerous high-profile figures, including movie director Woody Allen, who himself has been accused of by his adoptive daughter, Dylan Farrow, although Allen has denied the accusation. In this emailed invitation sent to Barak, Epstein also mentioned that a Rothschild was set to attend the dinner party as well, an apparent reference to, according to other emails, French banker and CEO of Edmond de Rothschild Group, Ariane de Rothschild. You know that the Rothschilds are a family that have been under the eyes of conspiracy theorists for generations. So it's really interesting to me to see that family name pop up here. Epstein also mentions a Pritzker attending, but it's unknown who that was. It also remains unclear if Ehud Barak attended the dinner at all, but he did respond afterwards saying, "Hi Jeff, just seen it. Saturday, tomorrow, or Monday are possible if this is still relevant. Please let us know. Enjoyed today very much." So that's the depth of the leaked emails, at least the emails that have been processed by journalists and investigators so far. These emails, exhaustive in their detail, lay bare a relationship where Epstein's predatory world of and disgusting evil intersected with Ehud Barak's intelligence-based strategic one, raising enduring questions about the true nature of the two's bond in the corridors of power. I mean, seriously, you have a former prime minister of Israel, you have mentions to Israel constantly in these emails. And you have this guy who's a highly trained warrior who's trained in intelligence gathering and is like an extremely smart, powerful man, and he has no idea that Epstein is doing all this. I find that hard to believe. But at the same time, the intelligence guy, former prime minister, not only was accused by a victim / multiple victims, but also he and Epstein are investing in bizarre Israeli intelligence, US intelligence connected startup companies that could potentially surveil people, and they're associating with Peter Thiel, the modern king of mass surveillance, and Epstein was surveilling and secretly blackmail video recording the people in his orbit. Yeah, I'm sure there are going to be more revelations here, but this has already been an extremely long video. If you appreciated this deep dive, which took a long time to write and put together, please be sure to like today's video, leave me a comment, and subscribe to the channel, and also be sure to share this stuff out wherever you can on your personal social media. These videos depend on y'all to make them possible because they're not being promoted by YouTube as a whole. But anyways, that's it for today. Thank you all for joining me this evening. I'm Colin Browen. Keep that tinfoil hat on. Always stay suspicious. Question everything. Please take those comments and run with them and implement them. And yeah, I'll catch y'all in the next one.